Welcome back to the TYT Get Out the Vote special with myself, John Iadarola, Cenk Uygur, and Ben Dixon as well. Cenk, what's been going on in the comments, the tweets, and all of that?
Yeah, I really like this comment from Top Cat. That is why members need to support. If you cannot afford to donate during these times, share the dickens out of all their videos. I love that. Whether it's the videos or the live stream, sharing and liking it, it takes 1 second and it makes a big, big difference. So thank you guys for doing that. And Top Cat, thanks for being a member. Speaking of which, new members on YouTube as we're doing the show, Average Josh MTG, Tariq Lemma, Ro Galos, good to see another Ro supporting the show, and Steven Schwartz all joined. And so hit the join button below if you're watching on YouTube to become a member, or go to tyt.com/join. I understand that somebody on Twitch gave bits to give Asher a raise. So that's lovely. I unfortunately don't have their name in front of me right now. So I guess it doesn't count. No, I'm kidding. It counts. I will see it later. You're awesome. And Bad Rongo donated 100 bits and said, quote, "These bits kill fascists." Of course, metaphorically and politically and ideologically, and here on that.
Exactly. Okay, so in this section of our special, we're gonna be talking about voter suppression, all of the things that are designed to stop you from voting. We're not covering all of the ways that your political power is minimized at virtually every level of the process and US government. If you want information about that, watch Monday's episode of the Damage Report because I couldn't stop talking about it. This is specific to voting, and it does come in a lot of forms, some of which are very hard to fight against, some of which there are potential solutions. So the most common methods of voter suppression tend to be things like voter ID laws, voter registration restrictions, voter purges, felony disenfranchisement, and gerrymandering. Now, obviously, gerrymandering, that is a bit longer term of a fix to fight back against that. But things like voter ID laws, with enough time, you can potentially get around. Now, obviously, you can try to get an ID, which is difficult, it does cost money in some places, but there are a number of states, I believe about 20, that do have programs where you can get a free photo voter ID, but it might take some time. So that's another reason why we're not doing this special the week of the election. If you are in a state that requires voter ID, and many do, you might wanna look to see if a program like that is available. And if not, if it is possible to get some form of photo ID other than that. So that's one way to get around it. But I wanted to give the guys a chance to talk about this. How stark is the situation for the American voter in terms of access to the vote?
Well, look, I'll make two quick comments. The Republicans get a twofer when they overturn ballot measures or portions of ballot measures that are trying to support democracy. So, for example, in Florida, they passed this great ballot measure to give people who had been in prison the right to vote back, because they've served their time and they're done with it. And a lot of Republican voters joined in on that because they know folks and have family members or friends that maybe got hooked on Oxy or whatever it might be, or robbed a bank or was a banker. Now, then they'd never go to jail. So it passed overwhelmingly. And then afterwards, the Republican legislators in Florida are like, nah, we don't like that. So now we're gonna impose poll taxes. Now those are illegal, but now they have the Supreme Court, so maybe they'll make them legal in hindsight and say, now you gotta pay fines and fees and you have to pay all this money to vote. And so they're basically undoing the ballot measure in a lot of ways. In South Dakota, I should say, a couple of years back, they passed a ballot measure even more overwhelmingly, saying that politicians should not take money from lobbyists, should not take gifts from lobbyists. It was actually really thorough and wonderful get out the money vote led by Republican voters. Those are the folks who control politics in South Dakota. The Republican legislators not only overturned the ballot measure, again, totally illegally, but basically said, what are you gonna do about it? Afterwards, they posed with gifts from lobbyists and put a picture up online. So that's how brazen they are. And the reason that's a twofer is they then go, well, I guess it makes people go, I guess voting doesn't matter because we voted on the ballot measure and the Republicans robbed us blind anyway and rubbed our noses in it. Well, guys, yes, but if Republicans are not in charge, they can't do that. And the way to get them to not be in charge is by voting.
Speaking of that, what's going on in Florida with the fines and fees, my favorite politician, tongue in cheek, Mike Bloomberg is doing something good about that. He is trying to help raise $16 million to help pay the fees for 32,000 people. The thing is, there are hundreds of thousands of voters in Florida who are disenfranchised by that very thing, Cenk. And the fact that Michael Bloomberg could actually just pay it off by himself and not have to raise it, but that's an entirely different conversation. But whenever I think about voter suppression, the first thing that always comes to mind is the House Speaker from Pennsylvania, Mike Turzai, who said years ago during the Mitt Romney race that voter ID, the express reason was it's going to help Mitt Romney win Pennsylvania. So I guess what year was that? 2012. I'm losing track of time here. But he made that confession, and of course he got in trouble because he made that confession. But he's really only the first Republican to speak as clearly about what the purpose for all of these voter ID laws is. It is a pure power politics play to disenfranchise as many voters as they can, particularly minority voters or impoverished voters, and give Republicans an advantage, and he said as much on film.
Exactly, and so many of these different issues that stop people from voting are they're state level. And it's just a reminder that while obviously we have to win the presidency and all of that, all these races are important. And look, we talk more about non-federal elections than the vast majority of media, but we also focus on Senate and congressional candidates, but we have got to get good people at the state level to take over these legislatures, fight back against the gerrymandering and other voter laws like that. It has a huge set of consequences. But I did want to tell you about another one of those forms of suppression that we talked about, one of the common ones. We gave you a little bit of information about how to deal with the voter ID laws, and there are programs. Voter registration restrictions can be rough, and it's not always the Republicans that do it. Take a look at New York and the Democratic Party. There can be very stringent requirements on registering far in advance of the election. Again, that's why we're doing this so far in advance of the election. So in many places, you need to look up your individual state, tyt.com/vote. You can get that information and you might be able to get around some of that. They're hoping that you don't pay attention to the election until the last couple of days, and then it might be too late. It's not too late right now. You can actually register. Beyond that, I did want to mention that one of the sort of commonalities across basically all these forms of voter suppression, they're designed to stop a lot of people, a lot of types of people from voting. But there's one above all others, perhaps, and that is Black Americans. I mean, these are basically all designed, some explicitly, some less so, to do that. We got some information for you. 70% of Georgia voters purged in 2018 were Black. Across the country, 1 in 13 Black Americans can't vote because of laws stopping them from doing so. And Florida is discovering that even when you go to the insane lengths of passing a ballot initiative, that can't necessarily be enough to get those rights back. 1/3 of voters who have a disability report difficulty voting. Only 40% of polling places fully accommodate people with disabilities, despite the fact that some of that federal legislation was passed decades ago. And across the country, counties with larger minority populations have fewer polling sites and poll workers per voter, leading to long lines, obviously. Now, mail-in voting can help to get around some of those problems. But we have seen, even in the 2018 election, a little bit in advance of the election, they will come in and they will start pulling polling places out. And what do you know, when the analysis is done, it's almost universally in areas with fewer white voters.
But John, to be fair, Georgia is 70% Black, right? That's why
I don't think so.
No, oh, that's
don't
weird.
believe so. But
it
yeah,
must have been a
and
wild coincidence that Republicans wound up purging 70% Black voters. I'm sure that it's got nothing to do with the fact that Blacks overwhelmingly vote Democratic and that Republicans are racist. Probably total coincidence.
Probably. Well.
Well, I mean, you took both of my points, Cenk, but let me just double down on that, right? Because the fact of the matter is this: is that Republicans would rather go through all the extraordinary lengths of trying to disenfranchise us than to just not be racist. Because the fact is that a lot of Black Americans are conservative because of overwhelmingly religious community and all those things we can argue about, that I argue about with them on a regular basis. But the fact that the Republican Party is so drenched with white supremacy, the legacy of the Confederacy, they don't want to let that go. And so what do they have to do? They have to disenfranchise us. I think I mentioned on the show before that I was purged in Florida back in around 2004 for literally no reason that they could give me that was a valid reason. And so my thing was that year is I organized about 100 people to go and vote on my behalf, but everybody's not going to do that. And so they know it is a very effective strategy to just purge us.
Yeah, so two things off of that, Ben. So first off, in some ways, maybe I should have been purged in Florida in 2000 when I voted there, because I voted for John McCain in the primaries back when that was the last Republican I ever voted for. But it's a good thing I wasn't, because I wound up voting for Al Gore in Florida in the year 2000. Otherwise, it would have been 538 votes. Okay, so now in reality, as I've said 1,000 times, Al Gore won the state of Florida and won the Electoral College. The Supreme Court blocked it. A friend of mine just sent me a very depressing note. They're like, after the election, what if the Supreme Court says 5-4 or 6-3? Yeah, don't count any of the mail-in ballots.
I mean, it kind of seems like that's it. I can't say that that's what the Supreme Court justices are expecting to do, but Trump is just casually dropping into conversations, including today, early, like a couple of hours ago. We need to make sure that we have 9 justices because they're going to try to steal this thing and we need to be defended. Like he assumes that they will have to weigh in and that they will weigh in to stop the count. That's what it's designed to do. He knows that he's convinced as few of his supporters as possible to vote by mail. I saw a chart showing from May to August the drop in Republicans intending to vote by mail. It used to be not that dissimilar from Democrats actually, but he was very successful in driving them away from doing that, which might end up being a horrible strategy. But assuming that they do turn out disproportionately compared to Democrats on the day of, and he looks like he's winning, he's not gonna let a little thing like tens of millions of ballots needing a day or two to count stop him from claiming victory. And the Democrats, I hope, are planning for a fight. They cannot allow this to be Florida again. But unfortunately, is Joe Biden really gonna fight that? Is Nancy Pelosi really gonna fight that? Chuck Schumer? These are exactly the people you would not want on the front lines if that fight happens.
Yeah, but guys, look, I hate the idea and I hope it doesn't happen. But if there will be violence, and so I don't want it to happen. Let me be super clear about that. But if they just say, we're just not counting all your votes, we're not going to count millions of mail-in ballot votes. Yeah, I'm sure that Biden and Pelosi would surrender after pretending to fight. But a lot of Democrats will not surrender. And if the Supreme Court steals it in that way, they've got to realize they're inviting civil war. I'm not looking forward to it. I hate the idea. I hope it doesn't happen. But there's only so much people will take. So you're gonna count, they're gonna count those mail-in ballots. If they don't, there's going to be earthquake-sized trouble in this country, like unreal trouble in this country. They'll have torn it completely apart. So, but Trump apparently thinks, I don't know if I could trust John Roberts to be a criminal, but I think the other 4 right-wing justices will steal anything. And so I just got to get one more criminal on the court and then maybe we could steal this thing. And so, but don't leave it to chance. The closer the election appears to be, the more likely it is that they'll steal it and the more likely it is that the Democrats will surrender. So it sucks that in a democracy, you should be able to just win by 1 vote. But in this case, we have to blow them out. If we don't blow them out, they're gonna do every dirty trick in the book. And the Democrats suck at fighting for us. So that's the reality of it. And I just gotta say real quick, Ben made such a great point. A very healthy percentage of African Americans are conservative because they're human beings. Same goes for Latinos, the same goes for Asians, etc. If the Republican Party wasn't so wedded to racism, they'd actually be in great shape. they'd have these really strong legislators who kick Democratic politicians' asses all the time, and they'd get a much bigger percentage of African American and Latino and Asian votes, and then they'd be gold. But even the allure of power cannot overcome their racism, and that's amazing.
The allure of power can't even overcome their racism. The other thing that John, you did you just make a verb out of Florida? I had to just double back. You said they got Floridaed. We don't.
I'm worried about it. I think like with RBG and filling the seat, if they can get away with it, they will do it. Why? Like, do we think that Brett Kavanaugh is gonna have an issue with stealing this thing? Like, I just am extremely worried about that.
Yeah, I don't even think John Roberts is going to have a problem fulfilling his role. I think at the end of the day, he may have sided with the liberal justices on a couple of key pieces of legislation or court cases in front of him, rather. But I think that he is going to stick with the conservative orthodoxy, just like Mitt Romney. Right, he tucked tail and came right back into the conservative orthodoxy, and we're going to see that Republicans play power politics at all times, and that's what's wrong with Democrats. The only time they play power politics, and I'm not trying to drive this wedge, is when it's against progressives. Now, I'm going to help you guys get rid of Donald Trump the best I can, but we got to call a spade. But they need to turn some of that machinations that they threw towards us towards the Republicans.
And no, but Ben, that's such an important point. It's, whenever you criticize corporate Democrats, it's usually the press that jumps up and down and goes, don't divide people. You should tell them, you should lie to people and tell them how great corporate Democrats are. No deal, okay? So they don't have to be great for you to vote for the non-fascists. It's not that complicated. But it is interesting, right? That apparently establishment Democrats have it in them. They play very dirty against progressives. We've given you dozens of examples here, and it's then it's a choice that they're making not to do that to Republicans. And man, I mean, of all the things that bother me, that's near the top. That they feel a kinship with these bastard Republicans more than they do with progressives who they're supposed to be ideologically aligned with. It's all the money. It's always the money. So look, again, we're principled. TYT.com/vote. Okay, do it now. Preserve democracy. Live to fight another day. And then you know what you do? You actually fight another day. You don't go home. You gear up for 2020 and primary the living hell out of those corporate Democrats and let them cry about it. And let the media cry about it. How their poor buddies like Elliot Engel and Lacey Clay are getting primaried. Oh no, what's gonna happen to Joe Crowley? He's gonna be a rich lobbyist. That's what was gonna happen to Joe Crowley. We all knew it, and that's exactly what happened after AOC beat him. All right, I'm gonna read names before we go to the break because you guys power us, and you don't do it millions of dollars at a time. You do it $7 at a time, like Andrea A in Cincinnati. That's how much she gave. Jorge in Springfield, Illinois, $15. Alexis in Edmond, Oklahoma, $27. Sarah P in Pasadena, Maryland, $27. Usla, Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, representing Turkish Americans. Thank you, sister. $15. Thomas B in Wilmington, Delaware, 27. Gemmo's back. Gemmo from New Orleans, $15. Trevor O in Selmer, Tennessee, $5. Joseph Z in Royal Oak, Michigan, $27. And Christy P in Odessa, Texas, $50. That's all at tyt.com/go. You power us, and we do our best to be your voice and to fight as much as we possibly can for progressive ideals. tyt.com/go.
Exactly. And we're gonna take a short break. When we come back, we're gonna be going over some of your voting rights. It's important that you know these, especially if this is the last election that you're allowed to exercise them in. But we're gonna be going through all of those after this. Welcome back to the TYT Get Out the Vote special. In this, the last section, we're gonna be talking to you about your rights. You may not have known that you have them, but you do kind of, and we're gonna let you know what they are. But first, Cenk, what's been going on in the chat and the member comments?
All right, just a couple comments here. Elizabeth writes, and she's a member, tyt.com/join to get these comments read more often. Anyway, Elizabeth writes, just donated $27 for this month. Thank you for all you do to keep us informed and awake to what is happening in America. Thank you, Elizabeth, because you do it too when you give money to us. You're helping to get that voice out. Colorless Green Ideas Sleep Furiously writes in, exactly, Cenk. We need a big popular vote when anything else is dangerous. And no more trigonometry with a great line. Hope in Democrats plus a quarter equals 25 cents. God, wouldn't it be great if we had a strong Democratic Party like the Republicans have on their side? Let us whisper of a dream one day. All right, anyway, new members on YouTube are Shane Smart, Mitchell Bundy, Lanya Lumpkin, and Lashika Drew. You guys are all the best. And finally on YouTube Super Chat, Dana Kramer said, keep fighting, democracy is on the ballot. And that's true.
Yeah. 100%. Okay, let's talk about some of your rights and how those rights interface with some of the situations that can crop up on election day. This is mainly for people who are going to be voting in person. There are some things that, because our country really doesn't care about elections or respect democracy, you might find yourself waiting in a very long line or having the paperwork be messed up. And that can cause problems, but we want to let you know what you should do in some of these situations, including if the line is very long, if you end up having to wait for a few hours, it's getting close to polls closing. The single most important thing you can do is to keep your place in line. The lines may be long, but as long as you're in the line when the polls close, you will still be allowed to cast your ballot. If you leave the line, that is probably not the case. So the most important thing is to stay there. I know it can be awful, it might be hot, you might get hungry, but use Grubhub or something, you can get some food delivered. The most important thing is that you stay in the line. When you get there, if they have some sort of issue, do whatever you can to vote on a regular ballot. Casting a provisional ballot can work if you have no other option, but there are ways that it might not end up getting registered. So that should really be a last resort, honestly. If any of that happens, you can call election protection. I'm gonna give you the number. You're not gonna remember it, but that's fine. Look it up. 866-687-8683. Election protection to give you that information. Thank you for bringing that up. About intimidation, which we're probably gonna talk about in just a minute. Trump is, he wants 50,000 Boogaloo boys basically at the polls. So that's one place that you can get information about that. If you're told that you're not on a voter roll, you can confirm that you're registered to vote. A lot of this is available online. You can confirm that you're at the right polling place. Some of that information can be checked at tyt.com/vote. You can print it out to sort of buttress your claims and those sorts of things. We're gonna give you some more information, but this is already a good bit. Cenk and Ben, in terms of the long lines, the goon squads, what is your strategy? I mean, mine right off the bat is, if at all possible, vote by mail, especially considering the pandemic, but that won't be available for everyone.
Yeah, all right, I have some unique thoughts. First part's not at all unique. For me, it's a no-brainer. I'm gonna do mail-in ballots because my voting area is in a senior citizen center, in a nursing home. Not going there in the COVID days to vote. So I'm gonna mail it in. And one of our members asked earlier, is it better to do it in person or in mail? Look, the in-person has the advantage of not having it be so skewed, because right now it looks like the overwhelming majority of people who are asking for mail-in ballots are Democrats, which means that it'll appear for a second, maybe kind of in some states, that Trump is winning the in-person vote before the mail-in ballots get counted. And that could be a problem for optics and politics, especially as these goons on the right try to potentially steal the election. Now, that being said, I still think it's better to do mail-in because better safe than sorry. What if you go on election day and the line is 3 hours long? What if you go on election day and the polling station is not open? What if you go on election day and they erase your name from the voting rolls, right? So the earlier you vote, I think the safer that vote is, in a sense. And a lot of states count the mail-in ballots immediately. So not all the states, but some do. So you'll get to have the advantage of that being counted early on as well. So I'm going to do that. Now, the unique idea I have is I came up with this yesterday because we saw the Republican guys try to block an area where people were already starting to vote in Virginia. Because early voting had started in Virginia, and they were chanting 4 more years, and some thought they were intimidating the voters there. Then I realized the Republican voters are scared to death of minorities. So all we got to do is get 2 or 3 black folks to show up in every voting area. We'll suppress the Republican vote by 10 points. Win easy.
Oh my God.
Weaponize their racism against them.
Don't listen to Cenk because he's going to get us killed because they will call the police on us. And as soon as they show up, we are dead on arrival. But what I would say this though, I don't know if the Proud Boys are really ready for the elderly black women at the church because they're not moving. They're not moving, and then they're gonna have to consider the optics of them trying to intimidate, 60-year-old, 70. Well, 60's not old because I'm getting. Let me bump that up a little. 80-year-old, 80-year-old Mother Beulah, from the Sanctified Church down the way, she is going to stare them down, and so it's going to be a political nightmare. But I don't think the bad optics of it is going to be enough to stop them from actually trying. And so, I think we are going to have some representation in different communities protecting the vote. And one thing I've seen people do is making appeal to leftists who may not be voting, but would they at least show up to the poll to stand toe to toe with fascists. So maybe if they stand toe to toe with fascists, they'll jump in line and do voting too. But either way it goes, I think we're up for we're going to see something interesting happening on election night, and I hope interesting will be the extent of it, and we don't use any other qualifiers to describe it.
Yeah, I don't want an election night that's going to be duplicated in a bunch of documentaries someday. Like that's not what I want. Okay, we're going to give you a little bit more, but before more commentary, just a little bit more information. Again, as with all of these things, go to tyt.com/vote for information or vote.org. Both of those are going to give you tons of information that you need to know to make sure that you can vote. I want to give you a few ways to respond to things that might crop up if you do decide to vote in person. All of this is a big headache, which is why I encourage you to not vote in person. But if you're registered and you're not showing up on the voter roll, when you show up, again, call the election protection hotline. Maybe we can put that graphic up again and give you that phone number. Check to make sure. If you recently moved, did you update your registration? You might be listed under the previous address. That's information that you need to know to make sure that they can check it. You can check with a poll worker to see if you can update your registration and vote a regular ballot where you are. That might be possible, or you might have to go to a different polling location. This is one way to find that out. If the person is misspelling your name, check to make sure that they're getting the spelling right, because if they're not, and if you have a complicated name like Iadarola, it's got a lot of vowels, they're not gonna find you under the wrong name. They might also have separate inactive or suspended list of voters that you could be on. So definitely have them check for that if they're not finding you on the regular list. Additionally, if you're being turned away from voting for not having a photo voter ID like we were talking about earlier, first get that, you have time, you can do it. Otherwise, confirm what forms of ID are acceptable. You might have access to some of them, including ones that you might not think of as forms of ID that should allow you to vote. Republican states, generally anything to do with fishing or guns, that will get you into vote. So check for that. Things like pay stubs or utility bills with your address in some states can count. That is again a case-by-case thing, so you're definitely gonna wanna check. But you need to be prepared for this because some people do get turned away. And an election this important, you don't want to be one of those people.
Yeah, that's why I was saying, look, don't take any chances. Go to tyt.com/vote right now. I've got it pulled up. Honestly, I haven't done it yet. I'm gonna do it as soon as the show's over. I wrote it on my to-do list. I'm not playing around. I don't know what John is talking about in terms of complicated names. I got a real simple name, Cenk Uygur. No chance that's gonna get messed up. But John, honestly, the other day I was spelling your name and I was like, John, I-A-D. Wait, is that an A or an O in the middle? I got it right.
Maybe both. Oh, you did? Okay, good. Few do.
I did, but yeah, that's among the reasons why.
Yeah, I am extremely concerned about all of those factors, and then the compounding it with the fact that that's going to require a lot of interaction with people, especially for me. I'm not trying to interact with anybody face to face, and especially if they're wearing a mask with it just below their nose. That seems to be really popular these days, and so I'm with you, John. Like, I know that it's going to skew the turnout, the results initially, but the more people who can take care of these things by voting or voting early. One of the interviews I did with The Conversation, there was an expert on voting who said that they are making sure that if you go and vote early, the risk of voting early is as dangerous as going to the grocery store. So if you're still going to the grocery store, voting early is as safe as going to the grocery store.
That is a great point.
Kidding aside, sorry, John, real quick. Kidding aside, the person who's most likely to have their name purged from the voter rolls is Ben. And in this case, not just because he's black, but because his name is common. If you have a common name, the trick that they use is, oh, well, there's two Ben Dixons. I guess there's no way there could possibly be two Ben Dixons. So let's just eliminate them both. I'm not kidding. That's literally what they do. Whereas pretty sure there aren't two Cenk Uyghurs. So I'm in a sense more safe that way. So either way, make sure that you're registered and get that voted.
Exactly, yeah. If you can go early, there's not gonna be a lot of people there. It's gonna be like a regular election, actually. Definitely do that. One concern I just wanna mention, I don't know how we fix this. I don't know if it involves a hashtag that we tweet at these hosts, or maybe Cenk knows some of them. I need to have a direct question lodged to Wolf Blitzer, Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, all of them. Are you prepared for there to be a difference between the immediate in-person vote and the votes that will come in as the mail votes are counted? Or are you gonna do your thing where you're just waiting to call states and everything? Because it's really important, and they definitely have no excuse for not knowing that. But I wonder if they have procedures in place to cover this in a responsible way without giving people the false impression that this thing is gonna be determined by 7 p.m.
Yeah, God, that's so important. You put the fear of God in me right there. The idea of the mainstream media covering this in a way that is accurate and gives people the right information and context. Oh boy. So no, I don't regularly communicate with Jake Tapper unless we're yelling at each other on Twitter. So that's probably not the best way to go. But I hear you, but no joke, I'll do everything I can to talk to any of the hosts that I might know on cable news. For God's sake, remember to tell people it. And actually, one of our viewers put it best. It was a member comment. That's why I love the member comments. They said you should stop calling it election day and start calling it election week. And remember, guys, the context here is some states are pretty good at counting those mail-in ballots really quickly, and some states are terrible at it. And so it's important for the anchors to know that, so they don't give people the wrong information. It depends on state by state. So for example, in California, believe it or not, my election is not over.
Hey, you might still be in this thing.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. I think only 77% or 73% of the vote has been counted. And that was about 6 months ago. So some states are terrible. And by the way, they tried to end the election when people were still in line. And John is absolutely right. Our campaign sent an election officer to tell that voting area, no, you are not allowed to send people home if they were already in line by the time the polls closed. So holding your place in line makes a big difference, and we did get that corrected. That's how I got all the way up to 6.5% instead of 6.4%. Am I allowed to make jokes about that? I think so.
Hashtag election week. I'm gonna start pushing that, and if you guys come up with anything better, I will push that as well. But I think that's the message. We need all of the anchors to understand, and everyone to have an expectation that it's an election week, not election day.
Yeah, exactly. And if that seems like that's gonna be unbearable, it's just another week in 2020. Honestly, what were you expecting the week to be like?
Exactly.
Actually, I gotta, as we're coming close to ending here, the most miraculous thing would be if Biden won easily. They called it that night, and Trump conceded. We'd be like, what?
Oh my God.
Right?
Let's have that. I'm down for that.
Don't get my hopes up.
We are unfortunately out of time. Ben Dixon, as always, thank you. Great to have you on. Cenk as well. Everyone go watch Ben's show. I hear it's awesome. Maybe consider. And for those of you watching, thank you for continuing to support the network. We couldn't exist without it. That's not hyperbole. It's literally true. TYT.com/vote is where you can get all the information that we talked about. Basically, you can be totally prepared to vote by mail or on election day. And with that, thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.